Perfect. Good afternoon. Happy Saturday. This is our Self-Healing Saturday video. For those who are new, I'm Dr. Melissa Sell. This is my life and business partner, Dr. Stephen Robinstag. Together we run a company called Ever Better, which is a mindset company teaching people how to alter their perception and change their experience and become more self-aware. And then I personally do life and health coaching from the German New Medicine perspective. And so the title for today's video is Keep Your Thinking Cap On. And the reason for that is I wanted to discuss how dogmatic thinking can limit us and can kind of put us in this prison of rigid rules and can keep us from really fully exploring the tenets of a paradigm and applying them in the most useful way. I know for myself personally, I have lived in the trap of dogma for, many years of my life. My religion was a dogma, and then I got into health and wellness stuff, nutrition, chiropractic, health philosophies. These all became dogmas for me, where I started living by these very rigid set of rules, and anything that was kind of outside, anything that was not consistent with what I believed, I didn't know how to interact with it. It was kind of rejected. It was no, we have to look over here. And you wouldn't look at the things that kind of defied your rules or the things that you thought were absolutely true. You just wouldn't look there because it became very uncomfortable. And then you kind of if you were having a debate or a conversation with something, it very quickly turned into something completely different. Instead of let's look at the facts, let's look at our own experiences, let's explore things, in kind of a scientific, objective way. It was totally subjective and it was very personal. And if you're not careful and if you're not aware and if you have a tendency, I admit I have a tendency to become dogmatic about things because that's just kind of the mindset that I grew up in. And so I've got to be kind of very aware of myself and how I'm engaging with certain information and materials so that I don't get into that trap. So I keep my thinking cap on and I continually ask questions because, information is evolving. People are evolving. Things are changing. You kind of have to bring new information into your realm and analyze it and see what's consistent, what's inconsistent, what's working for me, what's not working for me. And there's an openness and a willingness to not have all the answers. And so for me, for someone who likes to have all the answers and likes to share truths and information with large groups of people, sometimes it can be really hard for me to not have the answers. But we kind of just want to explore this kind of more philosophical, thought-based thing so that we can be more flexible, more adaptable, easier to talk to for other people, more willing to share ideas and exchange ideas instead of getting locked into a singular thought system or, oh, this is just the way it is. There's nothing else to do other than just refer back to the rules.
Yeah, to me it's about abstaining from the false comfort of self-deception. It's about, if I'm going to go out into the territory, there's some woods and stuff out here. We're living in a beautiful place next to a national forest and stuff. And if I'm going to go out there and look around and do interesting things and explore, I might take a map with me. The map would be very useful, especially if it's well made. But if I am walking along and I'm looking at this map here, and this is my ideas about what's true, my dogma or my belief system, or what the current system that I'm following tells me is true or is going to happen. If I'm walking around and I'm looking at that, and let's say that there is no sign or indication that there's a ravine on the map, and yet right in front of me there's a ravine, I don't want to put myself in a situation where I'm so committed to the map or to my understanding or to what I thought was true that I physically actually walk off the edge of this thing because my criteria for action and my criteria for belief have been kind of predetermined. You know what I'm saying? I never want to ensconce myself inside of a concept in a way that fortifies my awareness against kind of the assault of reality. You know what I'm saying? And there's nothing wrong with having multiple frameworks. If for organizing experience, for making sense out of experience, for understanding, oh look, here's some persons. I'm very grateful to people who are extremely ideologically committed because they have given rise to a lot of different thought systems that they probably would not have created if they weren't 100% committed to them. You understand what I'm saying? Like, people don't usually say, well, I think it might be true, and then they go and write a book about it. For the most part, people are really convinced that a thing is absolutely true before they start sharing it with other people, certainly before they build up a health system or whatever. I appreciate that, but I want to avail myself of the resources that they kind of have put together, but I don't want to commit to it. You see what I'm saying? It's a lot like dating. You know, I think you want to date ideologies, you want to date ideas, you want to play the field, you want to get to know them, you want to get to know them. But you don't necessarily want to commit yourself to one or the other, you know, because I mean, you know, it's an interesting thing what happens. I mean, I work with couples all the time. A lot of the times what happens is, at one point in their life, they made a decision that here's the person I'm supposed to be with. And they made that decision then. And 25 years later, the reality is suggesting to them something quite different. Perhaps this isn't the person that I'm supposed to be with, but they almost can't acknowledge it to themselves. It's not psychologically viable, because when they check inside, or when the information is coming from the outside world that says, hey, this isn't working, hey, this isn't working, hey, you are unhappy, hey, they are unhappy, hey, things aren't working out, they don't even really receive that information. They almost kind of delete it, or they distort it, they kind of just kind of put it off to the side, because the decision to which that information pertains in their mind has already been made. And it's easy to kind of overlook, to not recognize the fact that a decision is not an event. A decision is a process, right? If I decide that this particular path to health and healing, this particular understanding of wellness and well-being and disease is the only thing that I'm going to hear and listen to, I make that decision every single time I choose to ignore something that isn't consistent with it. I make that decision every single time I shy away from something or become combative when there's something that seems to be inconsistent with what I'm talking about. And so, you know, for me, one of the big things was moving out of this. There's something about truth. What's true? It kind of like ignites within us kind of this religious kind of fervor, you know, whether it's in a religious context or not. This kind of crusading kind of adamance. There's kind of almost a violence to it. There's a, like, if I commit to something I'm psychologically invested in a given thing being true. And I encounter somebody else who's psychologically invested in something else being true. Perhaps they're not psychologically invested in anything being true. They're just interested in what appears to be true. I go into like fight or flight mode in that situation. I feel myself under attack. It's almost like I have a banner of this ideology or this dogma or this idea or this perspective, and it's my job to represent it on the field of battle, right? It could just be a conversation, but my experience of it is an adversarial kind of clashing of ideas. And that is a sure way to cut myself off from, one, my thinking capacity. Which is really funny, like thinking cap. I never really thought about that as like thinking capacity. It's kind of
oh, I have another. That's good.
But that's pretty good. Maybe we'll do something with that. But you know, it cuts me off from that, because when I get it, if my heart rate starts to increase, I know for sure, literally, that blood, this fast beating heart is pumping. It's going to my limbs, my arms, and my legs, so that I can fight or run away. It's not going to my brain. This is true. I mean, the higher intellectual processes are not helped by this sweaty palm, racing heart kind of a situation. And, you know, one of the things for me is that, like, there's certain things I don't want to do. I don't want to deceive myself. I don't want to make myself inaccessible to information that could be of use to me, or perhaps through me of use to other people. And one of the ways that I've noticed and this is not a fault of you or of me or of people, you know, this is a phenomenon, right, that tends to happen when an individual, no matter who they are, when an individual becomes kind of psychologically invested in a thing being true, it becomes extremely difficult for that person to engage in kind of intellectual best practices when it comes to interacting with new information that's coming in, you know? I mean, I can't possibly know what I'm going to learn 5 days from now. You know what I'm saying? I can't possibly know what new information is going to come to me that could potentially, in theory, completely invalidate everything that I've thought was true up until this point, everything I've taught to other people. I can't know for sure that that's not going to happen. Now, if I need to feel like I know for sure that that's going to happen, or that that's not going to happen, that information isn't going to come, what will I do? Well, I'll put a bunch of kind of cognitive filters in front of my eyeballs, right? I'll kind of construct in my mind this grid matrix that will systematically filter out anything that differs too much from what I psychologically require and need to be true. And it's not fair to yourself really to place yourself in that situation. And when you start thinking in terms of what's useful, this is a very interesting thing, as I've discovered, is that models of reality or understandings or ways of thinking about things, ways of talking about thinking about things, different dogmas, they can be useful without being true. That there's not necessarily a one-to-one relationship between absolutely, factually, totally, completely accurate and useful to this person under these circumstances to these ends. And recognizing that for me allowed myself to kind of loosen up, because for a long time I felt like if I wasn't absolutely sure about what was absolutely true, I couldn't even begin to take any action. I couldn't even begin to help anybody, because how the hell could I do that? I don't even know what's what. And I'm surrounded I'm in a world where I'm surrounded by people, all of whom seem 100% convinced that they know what's true. And interestingly, they all are convinced that something totally different is true from everyone else, which is sort of a funny thing. And for a long time, I felt like I had to pick up that banner too, not recognizing actually that if I kind of shift to usefulness, I could say, listen, I don't know if the things that I'm going to share with you are 100% true. Maybe the facts suggest that they are today. I don't know what facts are going to become accessible to me next week. But I do know that people in your situation, dealing with what you're dealing with, have found what I'm about to share with you very useful. And that's one of those things too in terms of when you go to resourcefulness and usefulness, we tend to be very systematic and very conscious of the manner in which we present the material that we're presenting. Because, for us, there's this understanding that it's not just the quality of the information that we're sharing, it's also the ecology into which that information is being introduced. And what I'm talking about there is like the ecology of you, or the ecology of the person with whom we're working. That person has patterns of belief. That person has values. That person has patterns of focusing. They tend to maybe focus on what they don't want or what they do want, or they tend to sort information by what they have to do or what they can't do or what's impossible for them. They might tend to interpret everything in terms of how this means that what's going wrong is my fault versus how this means I can do something about what's going wrong to create more of what I want and less of what I don't. And when you're focused on that resourcefulness, there's a lot less of this kind of tendency just to unload the good news gospel onto a person and say, all right, go, fix yourself with that good truth I gave you. And there's more of a sensitivity to the fact that it's like, I've got potentially useful information and I want to introduce that information. And, it's kind of like, I'm thinking about from like a surgical perspective, if you're doing like an organ transplant, I'm saying, here I got like a good organ. I mean, I don't know what you think about that, but whatever. It's a good example, I think. I got a perfectly healthy organ that I'm going to put in this person's body. Well, you're not just going to throw that thing in there. Do you know what I'm saying? You want to take into account, well, what's the person's blood type? Okay, well, what's their history of responding to stuff like this? You don't just take the thing and say, well, the organ's perfectly fine. If it doesn't work, it's that person's fault, right? When you're introducing this information into the ecology of a person, into what it's like to be them, I say to myself, okay, how could this person potentially not understand what I'm trying to get across? How could they perhaps understand it and then use it unconsciously, unintentionally, in a way that causes them to create a negative experience for themselves? How, on the other hand, could I introduce it in a way that would make it maximally easy for that person to make sense out of interacting with that information in a maximally resourceful way? How could I make that kind of the path of least resistance for that person? And the less committed I am to the absolute truth of what I'm talking about, the more I'm saying, here's something that you might find useful because other people in situations similar to yours have found this useful as well. The more receptive people tend to be, because they sense that you're not coming at them with the sword of truth and crusading them into kind of falling into your intellectual line. They get that you're there pretty much to help them, and that they are really the measure of all things, and that the measure of the information that you share with them is the degree to which it exerts a positive impact on them and the outcomes that they're really wanting to create in their life.
Yeah, one thing that and this is something I've learned a lot of this from Steve, because he's very naturally good at it, where I would just kind of fling good ideas at people, tell people, no, this is the way, what you're doing is wrong, you need to change what you're doing, you need to change what you're eating, this is killing you, this is causing this bad thing, this is, and that's why one of the main reasons I love GNM so much and the paradigm is because it does take to consideration the sensitivity of that individual, so why is it if I tell all of these people this like life-changing information, why don't they all have their life change? Why isn't everything just immediately one-to-one? I told you to stop eating sugar, I told you to do this, your life should be better now. But that's where with GNM, it's every individual is completely unique in their perception and how they receive information, how they experience conflict, which particular biological program gets initiated in response to that conflict. And so that's why I do think that GNM is like the most maximally flexible, and I also think it's the most in line with natural law. And that's the thing that I like to, if I'm going to like hang my hat on something and say, okay, this is pretty much true based on what we know, are the laws of nature, the things that are true 100% of the time. The thing, like gravity, if I drop something, it goes down. Like there's a law to that. And so I feel like the more in touch we are with laws of nature, with understanding bigger pictures, those are things that are more reliable in terms of, okay, well, this appears to be true. Pretty much every time we've looked, this has always been true. Like that's what Dr. Hammer found with the research that he did of disease in the body, of changes in organs. He found, okay, every time there's a change in this organ, there's a change in this particular spot in the brain, and this person had this particular type of trauma. Every single time I look, there's these changes on the organ, there's a specific area in the brain that's impacted that I see on a CT scan. When I talked to that person, they said, oh, I had a traumatic loss of a child, and there was the impact, and there's the change in the ovary every single time. And so he saw that enough times to see, and that's how he came up with these 5 biological laws. They kind of evolved. They weren't like given to him on a tablet. He watched things, and he watched them happen again and again and again and again and again, and there never be any exceptions to the fact that anytime there's this type of skin change in this certain area, the person's had a separation conflict, and this area of the brain is impacted. Okay, you see that enough times, you're pretty sure that it's a law of nature that things always behave this way. And so that's one of the big reasons that I really love GNM, is because it's something that's like based in this natural law. Whereas with, nutrition, okay, so how come, person A can eat gluten literally all day long, and the other person has, one little fleck of gluten like wafted into, their eggs, and, they're super inflamed, but the other person's totally fine. And so that's where it's not a law of nature that this gluten causes this thing to happen. And so that's one of the reasons I like GNM so much. But again, there's still things to learn about the human psyche, about interpretation, about how we respond to things. And so I think that is such a cool thing to keep in mind when you are adopting, dating, all these different paradigms, and you're using them and you're seeing them at play in your own life, which I think is really important, which is another reason I like the 5 biological laws, because I can see myself have a conflict, experience a physical symptom, get over it, and say, okay, I can look at all of like these different points in time that determine, what was going on my psychological level. I can assume what's going on in the brain, and I can see what's going on the tissue level. And yeah, I think that's really cool.
Yeah, and that's one of the big things for me, is that you maybe will notice that I'll say this a lot from the GNM perspective, right? Mm-hmm. Because there's a big priority for me if I'm talking about that, if I'm talking about anything, right? I want a person to understand that, well, I want to give an accurate description of what GNM has to say about the thing, if I'm going to be telling you what GNM has to say about the thing. The other thing is that I want you to know that this is what GNM says. This is what this person's idea about how things work. That's what that is. Now, that to me is not qualifying the statement. That's not being wishy-washy. That's giving a person an accurate understanding of the reality of what's happening. It is implying, honestly, transparently, that there are other people in the world who say other things. And whenever I'm going to step into a sandbox, there's some wonderful things in some of these intellectual sandboxes and some of these conceptual sandboxes. There are some life-changing, potentially life-saving stuff in them. It's good to be conscious of the fact that you're stepping into it, though. And I think it's great when both, if I say to you, hey, you want to come step into the sandbox with me? We're going to talk about things over here. We're going to go to G&M World, right? We're going to talk about the way things work this way. Very often when I'm presenting ideas to people about consciousness or the nature of consciousness or the way that kind of consciousness manifests itself in reality, I will frequently start those conversations off by saying, let's pretend this and this and this. Let's say this and this and this. Let's try these things on, because we are in a world where the name of the game is don't acknowledge that it's a game. Don't acknowledge that you're dealing with a belief system, right? Talk about it as though it were fact, right? Be really certain, because if you're not totally certain, no one's going to want to listen to you because everyone else is being really, really certain, putting on a good show of it. You know what I'm saying? And I just think that there's, an element of kind of intellectual kind of consent. You know what I'm saying? Like what's it, like when you go and then you have to give the people all the information and they sign the thing.
Informed consent.
Informed consent. Yeah, there's like this there's that's an element to it. I just want to kind of go out of my way to make you conscious of something or to invite you to be conscious of something, because the world in general tends not to do that. Do you know what I'm saying? The world in general is trying to sell you on something. Sell you on a product, sell you on an idea, sell you on an approach, sell you on a spiritual, religious outlook, sell. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that necessarily, but it's nice to establish some kind of human rapport. It's nice to sometimes when you're building a relationship, and I think that like in the healing realm in particular, having a human connection is a really important thing that oftentimes gets overlooked, interfered with by things like standard of care and the prioritizing of certain behavioral outcomes. The important thing's not that you know that I care about you and that I'm going to kind of participate and co-create with you in a healing process. The important thing is that we get this chemical in your vein ASAP, and if I have to scare the shit out of you to do that, well then so be it. You know what I'm saying? Like that to me it just kind of seems to be overlooking some important stuff. And so I think too, like there's this responsibility element. You know what I'm saying? It's one of the interesting implications about G&M is that the individual's experience, the individual's psychological reality, the organism's psychological reality is really important. And what that means is it's not just that I say something to you or I say the appropriate thing to you. It's that I do my best to ensure that you hear what I'm saying in a way that leaves you feeling certain ways. It leaves you seeing certain things. It leaves you basically in touch with what you're capable of doing. Empowered in a sense, because it's really important. Because empowerment as a personal growth idea seems kind of like wishy-washy. It seems kind of like warm fuzzy. But if you look at like what is the significance of the psychological experience of empowerment for the organism, right, at the biological level, it's significantly different than the experience of disempowerment. It suggests something profoundly different about the relationship of the organism to its environment. And really, one of the big things G&M is saying is that it is the relationship between the organism, that's you, me, and the environment, the world in which the organism's operating, that gives rise to a lot of the stuff that then manifests as the symptoms of what traditional medical approaches or traditional healing approaches call disease. And when you understand that, it's kind of like, gosh, it really does matter that you kind of like all of this experiential stuff is profoundly important. In fact, in a way, it matters a lot more than you understanding the specifics of G&M. It's, for me, the understanding of G&M and the stuff like that we teach in the Resolve group. Really, the importance of that is that it kind of provides some texture to the whole thing. It provides these little levers that you can get your hands on to begin shifting your experience, like sometimes understanding the stuff in a totally new way, because so much of the traditional medical approach to things is kind of encoded into us at a unconscious level. We are kind of indoctrinated in ways that we don't even realize, and it informs so much about the presuppositions that we bring to things that sometimes I think having that kind of like defragged, having that kind of reprogrammed, having an alternative paradigm brought in, a lot of the times you don't even know really what your paradigm is until you're exposed to one that's completely different and in some ways diametrically opposed. And it is that diametrically opposed paradigm that brings into consciousness kind of like unconscious elements of the paradigm into which you've sort of been indoctrinated, which is a very useful thing.
Yeah. Very interesting. There was something I actually want to bring up just because it's in the news. It's very interesting and relevant, and I think there's just so much to explore there, and that's with this this lawsuit. You may have seen, if you follow anything natural health, this is like a big deal in the natural health world, that Monsanto got sued because a man developed non-hodgkin's lymphoma, a type of cancer, and he was like a school groundskeeper, and part of his job was distributing Roundup with the active ingredient, that glyphosate, you know, on a daily basis for his job. He had to put it all over the place a couple of times. I guess he got soaked in it. I don't know all the details of that. But after one of these experiences where he got soaked in the Roundup, he developed some skin stuff, and then, developed non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And so, makes a pretty good case. The jury ruled in favor of this man, that Monsanto knew that this was dangerous, and here's this guy just doing his job, making his living, being exposed to the stuff. Now he's got a deadly cancer, and he got awarded like $270-80 million, and he won. And so it's just so interesting just to look at, because everyone in the natural health world is like, woohoo, this is awesome, this vindicates us, this proves that this poisonous thing is causing this bad cancer. And so from the GNM perspective, you got to kind of like, kind of take that different point of view, is that because what does that imply? So that implies that poison Roundup is bad, and it gets in the body, gets on the body, and then it causes something bad in the body, which is cancer. And so that's kind of the typical thinking, is like we think toxins and poisons and things cause this bad thing called cancer. From the German New Medicine perspective, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma is due to a frontal fear conflict, or a feeling of powerlessness. And so that's the interesting thing, is we don't know all of the details of what was going on with this guy. We know, and I think this is interesting too, in the lawsuit they said, like, they're not saying it's the cause, but they are saying that it's like a major contributing factor to him developing cancer. Which is interesting, because there are so many different factors. And yes, this man using this chemical, what was his perception of the chemical? Did he have doubts about it? Did he have fears about it? Was he worried? Did he read an article? Was he exposed to information that predisposed him to thinking or being suspicious of this chemical that he was using? Did he have other stuff going on in his life? Getting soaked with any kind of chemical is pretty much gross, you know what I mean? It can be kind of scary. You can kind of say, oh my gosh, is this going to, cause cancer or turn me into Spider-Man? I don't know, and so he also developed like skin stuff, and like you can see in the pictures, like kind of boils and stuff on his skin, which is a separation conflict, which I just think is so interesting, where, Monsanto, I read in the thing, like the attorneys and stuff, they're like, oh, we're going to appeal. We've done however many studies, and, we've proved definitively that this does not cause cancer. And it's just so interesting, because in a sense, was it just the chemical? And then from my own perspective, for years I believed that, like, and I don't think that glyphosate is good. I know that it ruins ecosystems, it ruins your internal ecosystem, it kills good bacteria. I mean, it's a pesticide, it's a poison. It shouldn't be sprayed everywhere. It really probably shouldn't be used at all. There are so many unintended consequences in ecology, but like the causing of cancer, that's that like deep programming that most people think that a poison causes cancer and cancer is a bad thing, that GNM just looks at it in a completely different way, which could, it's profound. It makes a difference. It's good to be aware of like all of these different nuances. It's not just like a blanket thing. It's not just, oh, this poison causes this bad thing, case closed, Monsanto loses, all of that, because that still perpetuates this idea that we have of cancer, which biologically, from the GNM perspective, again, doesn't make sense. It's not accurate based on the 5 biological laws. But I just think it's kind of a cool and interesting thing to dive into and to look at, because of what the majority of people believe and think. And then like a case like this, people say, oh well, this proves it. And we forget the details. We forget like the person having an experience, a multi-factored experience. And yes, distributing poison and getting Roundup all over his body was part of that experience, but it wasn't the only part of his experience.
So you heard it here first. Melissa likes Monsanto now.
No! No, Monsanto is still evil, and they poison people, and they're corrupt and all of that. But I just think that maybe they could throw some money towards G&M research because.
It was really interesting because it seems like the thing is that there's what seems obviously missing to me in the core case, which is obviously missing in really all health paradigms, with the there might be other exceptions, but G&M is the only one I know of. Even natural health, right? There is an assumption that cancer is an aberrant process, which is to say that cancer is that basically it's a bad thing that's happening, and then there's a whole lot of argument about why. Is it genetics? Is it a mix of the environment and genetics and the nutrition? Is it like the EMF? I mean, what's going on? And G&M doesn't say, oh no, cancer is not caused by that stuff. Cancer is caused by this other random thing. G&M's whole thing is that there is an intentionality to the biological process that we've called cancer. That there's a biological significance to it. That it's not just a screw up, right? That it is an intentional happening. Now, there might be a misunderstanding, let's say, at the level of psychic communication to the body. What I'm saying by that is that, like, our kind of highly advanced nervous system might be sending messages to the body by way of our experience that are suggesting that these adaptations are needed when in fact perhaps they're not. And there's no question that the biological processes associated with cancer can be devastating if carried on and on and on. It's like if I'm going to like redo this house here and I take one layer of the wall apart and then I find out that I don't really like the scaffolding or I don't even know if that's the right word, but the frame, like of the house. And like I don't really like that either and I chop that down. Well, if I keep removing stuff, right? Because I think I need to keep removing stuff, eventually the house might fall down and it might fall down on me. And so it's not that, it's an infallible thing. It's that there's an intentionality to it. And kind of like the example that I makes sense to me is this whole idea that like if you're in an office building and someone keeps pulling a fire alarm, they keep pulling it over and over again. Maybe let's say it's someone for whom English is their second language and they speak some imaginary language where a common word in English, I don't know, hello, means fire. Right? Let's say that in this imaginary language that for this person, when they hear hello, they think fire. Every time they hear us say hello, they think we're saying fire. It's their first instinct. They get up and run and pull the alarm. Now, if I think that person is doing that deliberately to wreak havoc, right? Or if I think that they're mentally ill, then I'm going to treat them a certain way. I'm going to maybe physically restrain them. Maybe I'm going to fire them. Maybe I'm going to get them out of the building because they're a little gremlin who's causing problems. Once I understand, though, that it's not an intention issue, it's a communication issue, right? That they're hearing something, I'm communicating something to them when I say hello that I don't mean to be communicating. Hello means something different to me than it does to them. Stresses of the day, worry about being displaced at your job, worry about your relationship, worried about your kids, all this different stuff at the psychological level, worried about chemicals spilling on you, the experience of those things, independent of any physical stuff. Because it's definitely true that there are chemical materials that are caustic. I mean, that is definitely true that there are things that do cause physical abrasion. Like if I pour acid all over my arm here, that acid is going to go to work on my arm, and it doesn't require my psyche triggering a biological program to do that, right? If I fall off a mountain, the rocks that I fall onto are going to do some work on my physical body. The carnage that you would see there is not a biological special program. The point is that some of the things that look externally inflicted or some of the things that manifest as these external symptoms are the result of kind of internally triggered processes. So again, that's one of those kind of interesting like non-dogmatic things there, is that we're not saying, like for example, it's a big difference for me to say nutrition or diet doesn't cause diseases. That's very different than for me to say nutrition doesn't matter.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? That would be like saying, like, if I were to say putting water in your gas tank, let's say, doesn't cause the car itself to rust and fall apart. It doesn't cause the car to explode. It doesn't cause an explosion. It doesn't just messes it up. So if I were to say that putting, water in the gas tank doesn't cause the car to blow up, that's not the same as saying, oh yeah, just go ahead and put water in there. It's the same as gasoline. One fuel's the same as the other. Don't worry about it. Don't bother. Right? It's a very specific thing that we're saying. And recognizing that, I think, is important and useful. And there's a nuance there that most people aren't willing to be bothered with, I think largely because we in society in general have been kind of set up to have a very low threshold for checking out, a very low threshold for what we're willing to listen to. It's not that we're not smart enough, it's that we've been kind of trained to hear 2 or 3 words and then trust the authority figure. And it doesn't really work with GNM because I can't go to. There's no amount of years I can go to school where I can control your experience for you, or where I can become aware for you. There's no number of credentials of doctorates. There's no randomized controlled trials I can oversee. There's no number of times I can be published in respected journals where I suddenly have the power to get you to kind of wake up and become aware and really experience yourself as being responsible for what it's like to be you. And I can't patent that, and I can't put it into a pill. You know what I'm saying? And we can understand why it's not a popular thing. And if I have a low regard for human beings and I think they're dumb or they're lazy or they're not going to be, or it's not, I'm not going to try to teach people this stuff. I'm going to say, let's just commoditize this thing. Let's just make something that we can sell and inject it or give it to them. You know what I mean? And I don't think people are cynically doing that stuff, but you can really see where once you go down that line, there's a tremendous psychological advantage, I think, to believing that health is a fundamentally mechanistic issue. One, if health is primarily mechanism, you don't really have to be bothered talking to people. What a drag that is. You know how much time that takes? Time is money. The other thing is that we can develop physical things that we can just introduce into the physical body, and we can sell those things, and we can patent those things, and you can just see how it would be very easy for an entire profession to go really far down the road of, let's get a physical solution to this. Oh, you're overweight, here's a physical solution to that. Oh, you're feeling anxious, here's a physical solution to that. Oh, you're depressed, here's a physical solution to that. Oh, you have a shitty relationship because, you're married to a 1950s husband who thinks that your job is just to take care of the house. Here's a physical solution to that. You know what I'm saying? You can see how that would pick up a certain momentum and get us where we are today.
I mean, that'd be so easy for us. Like, literally, if the title of this video was like, I have the pill, I have the supplement, I devised, I went to the forest, I did these things, I found this amazing supplement that's going to,
evaluated by the FDA.
Yeah, that's going to fix your emotional problems. I'm going to fix your problems. And we love that. There'd be 500 people in this video instead of 5. There would be, you know what I mean? There'd be so many people lining up because they want a thing. They want a thing that's going to bypass the thinking process. They don't want to have to think about it. They don't want to have to, they want someone else to do the legwork. They just want the result. And I understand that, but it's kind of this intellectual laziness that we've kind of been brought up in. Like, we've been taught not to think. We haven't been taught to think. We haven't been taught to reason and to look into things and explore and ask questions, because it's not useful for authorities to have to answer difficult questions. It's easy for us to say, okay, no, this is just the way it is. Here, take these pills. Here, eat this food. I mean, it just takes a lot more personal responsibility to think about everything, to analyze it, and then to sit against your own experience. Say, okay, well, they say that this is the best diet, but I'm eating it, but I don't feel very good. It doesn't work for me, even though everybody says that this is exactly what you're supposed to be doing. Am I supposed to feel this way? And you just keep on doing it.
Or I feel so good about the fact that I'm sticking to the diet that I'm not even noticing how I'm feeling physically. That's an interesting thing too.
Yeah.
I feel so good about the fact I'm sticking to the exercise regimen. I haven't even noticed
taking the pills
that I'm falling apart.
People taking their pharmaceuticals, it's crazy what people will put up with as far as side effects and not even link it, even though because they don't read the papers that come with the pills. They don't read the insert that comes with the vaccine, and then they assume it's just something completely different. They just assume, oh, I guess, my feet are numb now, whatever. And they don't even think about, oh, that's right. My muscles have been wasting away ever since I've been on this statin, but the doctor gave it to me. And that's my parents thought that, and that would frustrate me and I'd get crazy about it if they'd
you mentioned statins. That's so interesting because my grandmother actually got non-alcoholic fatty liver disease as a result of being on cholesterol lowering medication, statins, for years. I mean, I think the doctor said, oh yeah, your cholesterol is a little high, so let's put you on this to lower it down, following the standard of care. That was the established procedure. And I remember that she wasn't delighted to have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, but she wasn't really bothered by it because the doctor was just sort of like, yeah, well, we're going to take you off these now because it looks like your body's having a hard time with them. And I was just thinking, if she had found out, like, for example, that she had it as a result of drinking, this is never drank a drop of alcohol in her life, I don't think, but if it had come from alcohol consumption, I think she would have been really upset by it. I think she would have been mortified by it. You know what I'm saying? I think she would have been very, I mean, especially if it was me. You know, if I would say that, this is an interesting thought experiment. I think if I developed a health condition as a result of excessive indulgence in alcohol, she would have been very concerned about it. But if I developed that condition as a result of using medication, and the doctor was like, "Oh yeah, we're just going to switch you around a little bit here," the experience of it would just be different because you know you're well, you know, we're assuming that this is the best thing possible because the doctor told me to do it. So all of the consequences that are coming with that, well, must be the less of all evils. You know, because I mean, I'd rather have. I mean, like, you know, after 10 years, you'd have 10 years of having, a, you know, a naturally biologically regulated amount of cholesterol in your body, or an artificial chemical sort of introduced into your system that your body would have never come into contact with at that level in nature, that is causing your liver to essentially become non-operational.
Well, see, that's the interesting thing about the liver, though, and like fatty liver is a starvation conflict, biological conflict. And so whether that's induced, okay, so you've got this artificial chemical within you, is that inducing some kind of starvation conflict within your body because, you know, there's like a lowering of cholesterol, or was it diet restrictions that she had during that time? You know what I mean? How no one could eat egg yolks in the 90s. There's so many things to take into consideration. But yeah, we just assume if it's on the shelves at the grocery store, if the doctor prescribes it, it can't be all that bad, you know? And so, but that, what that is not thinking. That's a person who's not thinking. That's a person who is not aware that every time they turn on the TV, they're being programmed. That's a person that's just not aware that...
every time the doctor turns on the TV, too, by the way, the doctor watches TV, too. And the doctor sees the same, you know, pharmaceutical commercials, I think, that we do. And that's an important... I mean, I think that's an important thing, too. Is like just to recognize that there's these consciousness is shaped by this stuff. And everything that we say is true about us, about paradigms and all this stuff, it applies to medical practitioners too, or healthcare practitioners in general, as a chiropractor or a doctor or whatever. And which I think is one of the reasons why you have to have your thinking cap on, why you have to be aware, you have to be watching what's happening. You know what I'm saying? And it's interesting. I mean, you can tell the difference between someone who's following a protocol and someone who's engaged thoughtfully. You can. It doesn't matter what. And I would rather have a healthcare practitioner who was thinking than one from a particular paradigm. You know what I'm saying? I'd rather have a thoughtful medical doctor than a rote chiropractor. I would, you know, because if I'm thinking someone's just following a script, or like, well, I'm a chiropractor, so this, or oh, I'm a medical doctor, so here you go. If a person actually is interfacing with you as a human being, I feel like that's a really significant and meaningful thing, and I think it can kind of manifest in really subtle ways, and like how they deal with the treatment of you and stuff like that.
Yeah, and that's like the big thing about what we teach, and why, you know, what we teach is so, I mean, it's so rare and so interesting because it's kind of teaching you how to think, how to engage with information, how to approach information, how to try on different perspectives, how to shift those perspectives, how to, you know, communicate with your body. All of these things, they take more time to talk about. You know, even in my work as a chiropractor, like, I really loved it, but I did find as I got more into the mind aspects of things, I didn't have enough time with people. Like, I came in, you know, they came into the office, I had a few minutes to do something to them physically, because that's what they were expecting, for me to do something to their body to help them feel better. But, you know, when you learn this new paradigm, it's like, oh, the shoulder pain, yes, I could manipulate it. Yes, I can move, you know, your joints around. I can help you in that way. But why does this keep happening? You didn't have an injury, nothing happened. We've got to kind of dig in deeper to this. And a lot of times people, you know, they don't, you know, they're like, what are you, my psychiatrist? Like, you know, they're not ready to kind of dive into those things. And so we had to find a different platform with which to interface with people and to get them these bigger ideas, these concepts. You know, we do long videos. Our videos are like, you know, 40 minutes, an hour and a half. You know, we've got these programs that we create in the Resolve community. It is chock full of new perspectives, ways of thinking about things, ways of understanding yourself, ways of kind of just wrapping your mind around what it's like to be creating an internal experience. And I mean, not many people are doing that because it's not, you know, it's hard to make a protocol or like a quick checklist of things to do, because it's humans, it's people with minds, with all of these different experiences, all of these different things going on. And so, you know, we teach you how to kind of get a handle on it. We're in the midst of an awareness challenge, which is, sometimes we do them for 5 days, sometimes we do them for a week, little exercises for people to do and engage with, for a week long, to see what's going on in my mind. How am I perceiving my reality? What feelings am I having? Where is that feeling coming from? What am I thinking about? What is this thought implying about who I believe myself to be? I mean, that's some big stuff. That is the depths of who you are. That's like what creates your experience of yourself. And I just think it's worth going there. I think that the time it takes, the personal investment, it's taking an interest in yourself. It's not taking the shortcut. It's not taking a, quick route. It's not like, just look at the rules. That's dogma. It's like, oh, we'll look at the rules. What do the rules say? And it's like, oh, but this doesn't apply. The rules don't apply here. Like, I'm having an experience that's got a lot of factors, and that doesn't fit on this piece of paper. And so having that ability to know yourself, to learn how you create your perception of reality, how to shift that perception, because it can change. Some people don't believe that you can shift your perception in a way that could potentially prevent a biological conflict from ensuing. I disagree, because I've experienced something different. I've experienced situations that before caused conflict for me, caused biological adaptation, and then I've been aware of that, watched my thoughts, watched my experience, consciously shifted that perception, and now I no longer have that same biological response. The biological program is not initiated. Some people say that's not possible. Some people say that, it's your subconscious mind, it's a biological reaction. So that's like even a dogmatic thinking within the German New Medicine perspective, that, oh, none of this is changeable. You can't change the way you perceive something.
As a general rule, as soon as a thought system springs up, and this is a manifest. This is not a commentary on the thought system itself. It's a commentary on patterns of information processing that human beings are prone to. The fundamentalists spring up. Isn't it interesting, for every thought system that there is, for every kind of dogma that there is, for every political affiliation, for every brand, there are fundamentalists who are very invested in the be-all, end-all information. That this knowledge is finished, and we have it, and this is it, and we're just going to curate it forever. And we're going to make sure that nobody pollutes it, or messes it up, or gets it wrong, or changes it, or develops it, or evolves it. And if they try to, well, we're going to do the modern-day equivalent of burning them at the stake, which is saying really mean things about them on the internet and attacking them personally. And that is just a thing that happens. That's just a behavioral manifestation of a certain way of relating to information. And I think it's important to recognize that no matter what realm we're operating in, there's always going to be a group of people who are literally falling all over themselves and hurting themselves and other people to let everyone know what's not possible and let everyone know what can't be done. And a lot of it comes from this. There's this assumption, this presupposition, which is, if I haven't heard of it, if I've never considered it, if I don't know how to do it, it doesn't exist, it isn't possible, nobody can do it. And if that's my way of thinking, it makes it possible for me to be a very intelligent person who says and does really stupid things, because I'm operating on a faulty presupposition. Because I don't know about it, it isn't true. Because I can't do it, it can't be done. Because I haven't heard of it or come up with it, it doesn't exist. Because so-and-so, the founder of the profession, the founder of the whatever, because somebody, somewhere, at some time, some woman, some man had some really good ideas and put this thing together. But they didn't say this, and so we can't do it. Jesus didn't say this, and so we can't do it. Dr. Hammer didn't mention this thing, and so it must not be possible. Well, guess what? You know what I'm saying? Everyone who has ever had a revolutionary idea in the history of revolutionary ideas has said some things that probably weren't totally accurate, and didn't say some things that would have been totally accurate if they said them. And so I'm not comfortable constraining myself to the expressed insights. And how can we even know the insights that these individuals had and maybe didn't get to the point of articulating? I know I certainly have entertained ideas sometimes for years before I gave any voice to them or formalized them or felt that I had a sufficient grasp of them to share them with other people or to incorporate it into kind of like my life philosophy. And so this idea that because a certain what do I care if nobody before me has really considered the possibility that a thing could be possible? What difference does that make to me? Somebody had to realize it was possible for the first time. Why would Dr. Hammer's body of work be the end of everything? If I mean, the best thing it could be is the beginning of something. And this is when he comes up with these really alternative ideas in general, alternative health ideas in particular, because it's not mainstream, because it's off to the side. There tends to be these really unhealthy tribal dogmatic skirmishes, and they end up being based around personalities. They end up a lot of ad hominems, a lot of straw man attacks, logical fallacies proliferate like you would not believe when it turns into this clash of dogmas. And what happens is we don't realize how ridiculous we are, that we're in a teeny tiny little pond that literally no one in the world knows about, and we're murdering each other in this pond over these trifling, trivialing minutiae of ideological differences. Meanwhile, there are 7 billion people in the world who have no idea this thing even exists, because no one leaves the pond, because everyone's trying to gain complete dominance over a pond that doesn't matter because it's so small, because no one knows about it, because everyone who does know about it is so busy attacking other people who know about it because they say it a little bit differently than everyone else. I mean, that is such just cliche of a lot of potentially really great ideas that never take off, because it's got to be my version of it. And they're doing, and that, to me, I'm just not interested in that. You know what I'm saying? I'm too busy for that. And I'm too busy for that because I did it for a long time, and I said, wait a minute, this is ridiculous. I don't want to be one of these people. I don't want to spend my life doing this. Let me get busy doing my version of these things, sharing this stuff with people in the way that I like to share it. Let me just offer it to people, not shove it down their throat, but just kind of arrange it nicely in a buffet and say, excuse me, would you like to come and have a little bit of this? And then, someone else, they don't, they want to talk about how awful the buffet is rather than just going somewhere else. That's what they want to do. That's okay. I think that, you want to waste a minimum of time with that kind of stuff.
April said you're on her soapbox. It's and I saw that happen within the chiropractic profession. I mean, there's so much that chiropractic has to offer people in terms of a health philosophy. I mean, that's like what brought me to GNM. I was so rooted in this understanding that the body heals itself. The body heals itself. Like, that's the mantra of a lot of chiropractors anyways, but like there's just so much infighting that it's like the profession, and people are aware of this within that profession, that it could be so much bigger. It could have helped so many more people. It could have proliferated and grown so much if there wasn't so much of this like super dogmatic, people doing things their own way, everyone getting mad at each other. It's like, oh, this is, I didn't, when you get into that, you're like, I didn't even know this was going on, but this isn't very pretty. This doesn't.
Not attractive.
No, and then, and I'm seeing that even in the German New Medicine community. It's like, whoa, this is a very small community. You would think that there'd be so much support and so much like everybody on board with like getting this information in the hands of people, because it's so essential for a human being to understand how their perception influences their body. But instead, people are like, kind of brutal,
I've encountered more people who are in Constellation and GNM than out in the everyday world by far. People who are, will say some pretty shocking stuff to you. And we're talking about, okay, let's say that there is a disagreement here. Let's say I'm incorrect. Let's say that. I still don't understand why you're behaving the way you're behaving. Let's say every gripe that you have against me, and I've got quite a bit of reason and opinion about why that's not legitimate, but let's say it is. Your conduct, your language, your attitude, your intensity, you know what I'm saying, is not really, it doesn't really, to me, jive with what I understand to be the GNM understanding of the importance of individual experience. If I understand what a territorial conflict is all about, and if I understand these different things, I just don't think I would allow myself to feel the way you seem to feel about me. And until I received this message from you, I didn't even know you existed. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, gosh, there seems to be a disconnect between the big picture principle. My experience is important, and my experience kind of has physical consequences. I better keep an eye on that. And the way I'm conducting myself. And now, here's the thing. I've got a policy. I've got a rule. I don't go see a doctor who's not at least as strong as I am. I won't see it. This is something I learned from my strength training teacher. I will not see a doctor who can't deadlift as least as much as I can, right? I want somebody who, if he's going to be working on my back, working on my body, who understands the kind of things I want to be able to do with my body, right? Now, if I'm going to go see someone who's going to be working on my psyche, if I'm going to go see somebody who's going to help me be downgrading some conflicts, and if that person seems to be profoundly conflicted about the fact that there are other people in the world who have different ideas than they do, or about the fact that there are other people who have different takes on similar ideas, they're not really good at sharing space. I don't know if I want to work with that person because, I don't know, you might have an encyclopedic knowledge of the chart, but it seems like there is a disconnect when it comes to the practical application. Because when it comes to dealing with life, when it comes to downgrading or resolving or avoiding conflicts, what that looks like is figuring out how to cope with the vicissitudes of life, one of which includes encountering people who have opinions and views that I don't agree with in a way that doesn't trigger biological responses from me. And if I witness you on social media or in a public forum demonstrated an overt inability to cope with that particular vicissitude of daily living, I'm going to say to myself, God, I don't know if this is the person I want helping me resolve my conflicts. Because not all, I'm sure everyone deals with conflicts and stuff like that, but not everyone puts them on display. Not everyone kind of demonstrates kind of remarkable obliviousness to how their perspective looks to other people. You know what I mean? And that's just kind of like, sort of speaks for itself in a way.
Yeah, and I think, and that's just that dogma coming through. That,
right, it's rigidity, yeah.
Yeah, that rigidity. And so that's the thing that, that flexibility of thought. I really love that analogy for like flexibility of the body, flexibility of thought, where you can see other people's perspectives. You can see things from their point of view, and then you can understand, oh, this might be what is going on with them. To understand that, I think, is really huge. And so I think everyone would benefit from more of that, keeping your thinking cap on, keeping your like reasoning capacities with you at all times, so that you're not just encountering someone and just rebuffing them just because they said one little thing. Like, get to know them, learn, understand, ask questions, because that's how this thing is going to grow. That's how, GNM is going to grow and reach more people. That's how, you are going to expand as a person. Instead of rejecting, just ask more questions. Be curious, genuinely curious, genuinely, like caring to understand another person's point of view. And
that's a safety thing, I think, too. I think it's about learning to feel safe, learning to feel basically okay. That, for me to be a person who feels existentially okay, or who's gotten to a point where like my relationship to myself, my relationship to the world, my relationship kind of to existence, I've done a lot of work on that, such that it's much better now than it was in the past. I feel much more okay. I feel much more safe. I feel much more just basically fine. For me to then expect people who are not in that position to be kind of as chill or as kind of cordial or as conscious as I am when I'm at my best. Not all the time, but when I'm at my best. That's an unrealistic expectation on my part. And I think that, you see a lot, but that's that thing too, is that if you see a certain kind of way of behaving, or if you see a certain kind of attitude that you would like to have yourself, the state of consciousness that the person is in who's displaying whatever that is probably different than yours if you're not displaying that thing, that trait too. And so don't beat yourself up for the fact that you're not displaying the same thing as someone else when you guys are in different states of consciousness. Find out as much as you can about their relationship to themselves, the world, other people, about the state of consciousness they're occupying, and kind of occupy that state of consciousness yourself, and your own version of their thoughts, feelings, behaviors, results, relationships, creations, outcomes. It'll all flow from that. But that's a flexibility thing, and you have to know that that's an option for you. You have to recognize that, and that was it took me forever to find that out, to recognize that what I thought of as myself was really a process, and that I was making choices every moment that was giving rise to this thing that I then identified with and kind of would hang my hat on. And once I realized that, I started making changes that made it easier for me to be and do the person, do the things that I wanted to do and be the person that I really wanted to be. And if I didn't have that flexibility, I would be much less happy with who I am and what I'm doing right now. And I think that in interacting with other people, kind of keeping that in mind, you become a doormat, you know what I'm saying? But I like to have the option of feeling compassion for somebody who's being very aggressive to me. I like to have the option of kind of understanding what's going on with them in a way that doesn't necessarily make their behavior acceptable or appropriate, but it allows me to make sense out of it. I am not confused about why this is happening. I think I've got a pretty good idea about it, and because it makes sense, I feel less outraged by it, and because I'm so kind of solid where I am, and like my okayness is not caught up with them being aware of the fact that I'm okay right now, I feel safer, so I'm making smarter decisions, better decisions, decisions that I feel better about once I've made them. I'm doing things that I don't go after I've done them, or saying things that I'm happy to have said after the fact. That's all really a luxury and you know, it's a perk of consciously occupying a state of consciousness that's consistent with what you want. And that's not something that a lot of people have been gifted an awareness of. Not a lot of people have had a life experience that have invited them to develop that skill. And for me personally, once you become aware, I think becoming aware of other people's sometimes lack of awareness and all the different things that can manifest as, especially with regard to their treatment of you, is kind of like the next step in the next frontier. You know what I'm saying?
That's really good.
So I learned not to resist things. Can I not resist when I do resist? And more importantly, can I let it be okay when other people don't let whatever happens be okay? And when they're resisting something I'm doing and then blaming me for the experience they're creating as a result of that resistance, it just is kind of, you know, it's like an onion. There's all these different layers to it and stuff.
Very good. So I hope you guys got a lot out of that today. I thought it was just like a really interesting thing, some interesting roads to go down. So keep your thinking cap on. And if you're interested in learning more about our perspective, about how we think, about how we teach people to become aware of and resolve and prevent conflicts, you can check out the Resolve program or send me a message if you're interested. If you're interested in our personal coaching, send us a message. Yeah, we just want to, you know, these ways of thinking really work for us. They've really, I tell you, it's absolutely transformed me as a person to have access to these perspectives. Like I talked about in the beginning, I used to be very rigid, very dogmatic, very just like, you know, my way or the highway. This is it. And like learning to become I mean, that affected my relationships. Obviously, it affected my relationship with Steve. It affected my relationship with my entire family, with everyone. That rigidity within me, that dogmatic thinking within me, I wasn't aware to the extent to which it was impacting my experience in a negative way. And becoming aware of that, having access to these thought technologies and these new ways of thinking and this new perception and this new concept of myself, I'm much happier. I don't have anxiety. I don't worry. I don't stress. And when I do, I know what to do about it. I know how I got to this negative state, and I know how to get out of it. And so that ability to go from state to state and have the awareness, have those breadcrumbs, know how to get from one place to another emotionally in my experience has been the most enriching, rewarding journey of my life. It's led me here. It's led me to GNM. You know, this, you know, our relationship and Ever Better, our company, it's all blossomed out of me being a really dysfunctional wreck, just so you guys know. Like, I don't think people really maybe necessarily realize that, like, I was just a mess mentally and emotionally.
Just taking all the credit.
And relationally. No, see, and it's been a wonderful journey together of us learning how to be better in relationship, but mostly, first and foremost, the relationship between me and me has been, that's the thing. That's the basis on which all of your relationships are built, or like, it's like, how are you with you? And fixing that inner relationship is like the core of all of the work of GNM, all of the work of Ever Better. It's what's going on in here? What is this creative process that's creating this ongoing experience of what it's like to be you? And there's just so much cool stuff that we've developed and we've worked out to kind of teach these principles to people. Hi, Susan, I'm glad you made it. We're about to wrap up here, but you can catch the replay. But yeah, send me a message if you need anything. We love you. Have a great rest of your weekend. See you soon.
That's not it.
I don't know how to end this one. Live.
That's funny.
X. And.
Are you sure want to stop streaming?
Yes.
Is that, yeah, then we can post